Hey everybody, so if you've been around, you know that every once in a while I like to dive into a good old fantasy novel, a book that just takes me away to a world and adventure all its own. And in November, I actually read only fantasy. So today I'm here to wrap up my fall fantasy reading, and hopefully, if you're a fantasy lover, put a book or two on your TBR. Let's get started. Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. It's Russell with Ink and Paper Blog. How are you all doing today? As always, I hope you're happy, I hope you're healthy, I hope you're safe, and of course I hope you're reading a great book or two or three or four. As I said, I decided to take a lot of the end of the year to just read some of the fantasy books that had been sitting around that I really wanted to read and dive into some of those big series that everyone was talking about, so that I could make sure that I was up to date on the current fantasy reading. I am not up to date. There are so many amazing fantasy books out there, but did I read a good stack of books? I absolutely did. So if you're a fantasy lover, get out your pen, your paper, your Goodreads, however you keep track of your TBR. If you are so able, please get these books from your local independent bookstore, or if you're a library user, get your library to get you a copy as well. I am going to start with, I think, the two books that were the most, well, I don't know if they were the most, but they were the ones I heard about the most. I've already reviewed the first in one of the series and just bought the second in the other. So isn't that a crazy way the world works? But we're going to start with Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. This is out from, I don't know this publisher other than these two books, and clearly I need to get on board with that. Red Tower Books, because they have two of the biggest books of the year. This is the sequel to Fourth Wing. This is Iron Flame, and it was quite an adventure. So, if you all remember, I talked about Fourth Wing. We have our main character who really, at the beginning of the first book, she just wants to be a scribe. She wants to be a historian, but her mother, who is the head of a military unit, forces her into the Dragon Wing, which is a competitive group where you train to be chosen by a dragon, and then you join sort of the army of dragon riders, okay? The first book, all sorts of stuff happens. There's intrigue and political misrep, that's such a one of my work terms. There's political conniving, and our main character is just being hunted down, and she winds up falling for this man who is actually from the son of someone who tried to rebel against the current kingdom. We find out as the story goes on that there's a lot of stuff we don't know, and that carries into book two. I will say this, book two is just as good as book one in far as the story is fantastic, the dragons are great, the magic, the adventure, the twists, the turns. I will still say this, there is a romantic element to both of these books. There's a sexual element. That's why I do not consider either of these books YA. I don't think it's completely necessary to the overarching scheme, but it just means that part's not for me. I know a lot of people enjoy sort of that romantic element. The romance is fine with me. I don't need all of the hoo-ha that goes with it. But other than that, I love this world. I love these characters. I need to know what's going to happen next. I love dragons. I love the snarkiness of the main character's lead dragon. I love sort of just how everything is not what you think it is. And in this book, we learn that there were even more secrets than we thought in the first book. So I highly recommend the series. I think if you're a fantasy lover, you'll like it. For me, they were a great escape. So that was Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros, the sequel to Fourth Wing. You can get them both now, both in beautiful editions, both of them worth your time, I promise. Another book, this is the first in a series that I saw everywhere, and I was just like, you know what, I'm going to order it, and I'm going to just dive in and see what it is. I knew nothing about Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I do think it's funny that this is Rebecca Yarros and this is Rebecca Ross, and they have probably two of the big fantasy romances out there right now. Divine Rivals is a little bit heavier on the romance, a little less heavy on the fantasy. But we're in a world where there is a war going on, a war between two gods that were thought to have been disappeared, but they have come back. And it starts in this major city where the city is sort of thinking the war is far off and will never reach them. We have a main character who is a young woman from sort of the lower class who has sort of worked her way into the position of possibly being a lead reporter for this, like the second most popular newspaper in town. She is in competition with this guy who is from a very wealthy family who also wants to be like the new, and they're sort of competing for one spot at the newspaper. We find out that our main character has started to receive like letters under her doorway from a mysterious person. And they start to sort of have this relationship back and forth. And what winds up happening is our main character has some tragedy go on, and she decides to go off to war as a correspondent to report back on the war. And many things happen. So this really is the story of the main two characters who, one is trying to find some sort of semblance to her life because her mom is gone, her brother went off to war, she doesn't know where he is, and she wants to find a sense of self. Where is she going to go? So she chooses to go to war. And then we have the boy. We have the boy who she is competing with and who doesn't want the life that's sort of being written by his parents and the decisions he makes to sort of make his own life choices. Of course, there's romance between the two of them, y'all. That wouldn't be a book if it wasn't. I will say I love the characters. I love the banter. I love the conceit of this sort of, they communicate via these secret notes because of these magic typewriters, which hopefully once you dive into it, you'll love it, the idea as much as I. The war that's going on and sort of how that sort of plays part. And it's also a romance gone sour. Between the two gods. I really enjoyed it. I turned the pages. I actually listened to this on audio as I read it. It was a very good audiobook, and I just bought the sequel. I think it's actually only a duology, so I think it wraps up in 2 books, and it just came out. So if you're into that sort of stuff, sort of a light fantasy romance with war and political intrigue and hoping that they will get together and all of that sweet and kind and loving stuff, Divine Rivals, Rebecca Ross, totally loved it. Totally. I can't believe that I just said that word that many times. Another series that I started, and I have, I think, the first 3 thanks to the publisher, Orbit. I have to say, Orbit is a publisher that I think mainly does like fantasy and science fiction, and they are very kind to me. They send me a lot of books, and I have to tell you, I love everything that they've sent me. Everything I've read by them has been fantastic. And that is no different in the Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. I think Andrea Stewart actually may live near me somewhere in the Bay Area. But this is the first book in a series. Now, this one's a little bit more complicated to wrap up in a summary, but we have a number of characters. But what we have is a world where we have an emperor who has basically saved this civilization from a prior enemy by using bone shard magic. What this magic is they take a bone shard from every person in the colony and they use it to instill into sort of like these monstrous beasts that do all of these activities across the region. Our main characters are twofold. We have the daughter who cannot remember much about her life, but is trying and competing to become the heir that she knows she is. Her father, the emperor, is old, things are happening, and she is sort of behind his back trying to learn this magic. Our other character, main character, is a smuggler who is really, in the beginning of the book, out for himself, who actually turns into sort of like this underground hero by rescuing children from bone shard ceremonies. And then things start to go awry across the entire kingdom. There are many other characters. There's much more political intrigue than that, but it's a bit difficult to summarize in a few sentences. This book is fantastic. The pages will turn. The characters are great. The magic is interesting, a little complicated. Not sure I completely get it, but there are two more books I think that I need to get through, and I think it will come together. But it's one of those books where I was like, do I read what's next in the stack, or do I go get the sequel? I didn't get the next one, but I'm very, very, very close to reading it because I really enjoyed The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart, out from Orbit. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Okay. Another book that is actually, I think this is the fourth in this series, and it's a series of novellas, and that's Mammoth at the Gates by Nghi, out from TORDOTCOM publishing. The first one in this was The Empresses of Salt and Fortune, and then it was When the Tiger Comes Down the Mountain, Into the Riverlands, and now Mammoth at the Gates. I own all of them. I've read all of them. They are all fantastic. Our main character is a historian that basically walks around all of the continent collecting stories, and they are part of a group of monks that basically just chronicle the history of this land. They have these amazing birds that can remember everything. Our main character, we've met them through all three of the previous books, has returned back to the sanctuary where the monks are, and it's under siege by this group of people with these mammoths because they want to take back the body of one of the head monks that has passed. Before he became a monk, they became a monk. I can't remember the pronouns of this person, and I apologize. Before they became a monk, they were like part of a family, left, became a monk, and now that family wants them back. And basically the political intricate history of all of that. But we also get to know more about these birds that are very connected to the monks that they serve with. It's very good. These are short snippets of a story that come together so brilliantly in just a few pages. I feel like I'm always surprised by this world and how much I learn about it in such a short amount of time. And the pages flip. I love all four of these novellas. Please read them all. And this is Mammoths at the Gates by Nghi, and this is out from TOR.com, but I recommend all four of them. They're all fantastic. Okay, so the last two books I read, I'm actually going to tell you about the next three books up in my TBR, fantasy TBR as well, but the next two that I've read are both sequels. The first one is The Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig. This is also a duology. The first book in this series is One Dark Window, which I just read to, and the minute this one showed up from Orbit, I was like, I'm in. I've got to know how this is going to end. The main character in this is Elspeth. So in the first book, we find out that we are in a world where magic is really contained into these cards. That's like a deck of cards. There are many of them, and each card has its own power. But people do get infected with a disease that gives them a power, but they're automatically killed by the government because of many reasons, which you find out if you read the books. But using the power causes them to be ill. Well, Elspeth's ill. She's hidden. No one knows she's sick, and she has touched one of these cards, and the being inside the card has come into her and sort of is like has the ability to take over her body and do things. The first book, this one has also sort of got this romance to it. She meets this other man who's also secretly infected, has all these powers, and they are trying to hunt down the full deck of cards because supposedly when you get all the cards, you can meet the woman who put it all together and lift the fog from the community, and things will go on. But of course, the king who's in power doesn't want that to happen because he's afraid that he'll lose power, and he wants all the cards to himself. And this book just continues that. It gets a little bit darker than the first one, to be honest. But Elspeth and all of the characters, I will say, I think her cousin's name is Ivy. I'm not sure that that's 100%. Hawthorne is her last name. She is a woman who sort of her father uses her as a political card in the first book to gain political stand by marrying her off. She gets a magic card called the Maida, which makes her beautiful, but as you continue to use the card, you lose your heart. You sort of become an ice princess inside. She is like a main character in book 2, and she is fascinating and fantastic. The women just are phenomenal in this series. And you want to know how it ends. I'm telling you right now, read both of these books. I highly recommend One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig, out from Orbit. You will not be disappointed. Speaking of sequels, and now I need the third one because I know a third one is coming, I have to talk about the Sapphire Alter by David Dalglish. This is also out by Orbit. I'm telling you, Orbit treats me very, very well, y'all. And the first book in this series was The Bladed Faith, and the second book was even better than the first. So we're in this world where we start on this island in the first book that is taken over by this empire that has just been conquering everyone. And the way that they take over is they kill the gods of the island or the land, and they infiltrate and they impose their religion and their one true God on everybody. Well, this island in book 1 and book 2, they're not doing it. They're not into it. And the prince of the island, thought to be dead, in book 1 is actually found and sort of trained to be a vigilante and sort of empowered by the people to be the one, their sign of hope that they don't have to fall. Lots happened in book 1. Let me tell you, that book was all over the place and it was fantastic. There are so many great characters in this. The prince is working with 2 amazing women. One is a god whisperer who can allows this one god to take over her body. Another is this fearsome warrior who has this amazing romance with this woman and is trying to decide if she still wants to be a warrior or just settle down. And then the political intrigue of it all, the overarching theology of the takeover country, it's just wacky, doodle, crazy, so good. And in this book, we find out that a lot of the history of the island is actually a lie, and what that means to everybody involved. It's hard to explain fantasy books that are so intriguing and so intricate, but I'm telling you, I am obsessed with this series. The Bladed Faith, book 1, The Sapphire Alter, book 2. Cannot wait to read book 3. Please pick them up if you're a fantasy reader. I promise you. I will say I've read both of those with the audiobooks as well, and they are both very, very good audiobooks. Okay, so those are the ones that I've read. What's up next on my fantasy TBR, you're asking? I have 2 sequels. I'm clearly in a series thing right now, and 1 standalone so far. I think it's the first in a series. The next one is called Traitor of Redwinter. This is the sequel to Daughter of Redwinter by Ed Mcdonald. This is out from Tor. Obsessed. So in book 1, we find out we're in this world where people have magic, but a forbidden magic is the ability to talk to the dead. Our main character can talk to the dead. She's been hiding it for a long time, and she winds up being intricate in overthrowing a plot to sort of destroy the ruling kingdom and the magic bearing people in book 1. And a lot goes on. So much goes on. And book 2, I've actually started this book. I'm 100 pages in. Book 2 picks off right at the end. She's actually become more part of the community, and things are going through, and people are starting to sort of push back against the ruling family, and the people with the magic are trying to figure out what to do next. It is very difficult to explain how good this book is. Book 1 was phenomenal. These are a little more dense. It takes a little bit more time for the world building to come to focus because you have to sort of get all the pieces. But I'm telling you, it's really worth it. Daughter of Redwinter, Traitor of Redwinter by Ed Mcdonald, out from Tor. 100% worth your time. I completely promise. Okay, next is a book called Foraged by Blood. This is by Ehigbor Okosun, and I apologize if I am butchering that name. It is out from HarperVoyager. Let's just take a moment at the cover, right? The cover. This is the first in the Tainted Blood duology. So it's only a duology, so that means we're going to get the one. I am also about 50, 60 pages into this one. This is what I know. So we have one of those things where we have a group of people who has conquered another group of people, and our main character, Demi, and her mother are sort of like magic on the downside, right? They have magical abilities. The mother is known to cure people, to help people, but they can't really talk about it because it's really against the law. On one day, a highborn young prince type is brought in to be cured by a woman, and Demi's mother cures her, and she thinks things are going to wind up going the way that they are, and it actually turns out that they're turned upon and the mother is killed and Demi goes on the run. This has sort of got a Nigerian mythology background, so it sort of builds that into it. The audiobook, I audiobook when I read. I say that all the time because I want people to make it normal, because I think it really does help for those of us who have issues focusing when the world is going on around us. Wonderful storyteller voice. Highly recommend the audio, and I'm really excited to finish this one, being 50 pages in. Last but not least is actually the book that I know the least about as a sequel, but I loved the first one, and this is All the Hidden Paths by Meadows. This is out from Tor. This is the sequel to A Strange and Stubborn Endurance, which I read, was it last year, I think? And when I say last year, I mean 2022. And I absolutely loved. It is a political thriller, fantasy sort of thing with queer romance. And I'm going to use, because I haven't started this one, so I don't know much about it. It says, with the plot against them foiled and the city of Quiati in safe hands, newlywed and tentative lovers Velasine and Cathari have just begun to test the waters of their relationship. But the wider political ramifications of their marriage are still playing out across two nations, and all too soon they're summoned north to Thani's capital city of, I can't say these names, you know how I am, Quihazan, to present themselves to its monarch. When Cathari is newly invested as his grandmother's heir, and Velsani's old ghost gnawing at his heels, what little peace they've managed to find is swiftly put to the test. And it goes on from there. I loved the first book in this series. I really thought it was so well done. Sometimes I think political fantasies where there's not a lot of magic or anything like that can get lost a little bit in the politics of it all. This did not do it. The romance was still sort of like tentatively sweet, and you were rooting for them. And I am so excited that book 2 is out, and I cannot wait to see what happens next. And that is All the Hidden Paths by Meadows, out from Tor. Okay, this is a big stack of books, so I'm not going to try to hold it up for you. But all I'm going to say is, if you have a genre that you rely on to sort of break up your reading, to get you back to a happy place, love it, enjoy it, and indulge in it. And I hope, if fantasy is yours, that I've been able to put a series or a book or all of them actually on your TBR so you can enjoy them as much as I. Because fantasy really is that for me. It's that book that I go to when I just want to escape. So as always, I encourage you to shop locally, read globally, and until next time, I wish you happy reading. Bye everyone.